Hi guys, Mrs. Heck here again. Today we're going to be using the material that we cut when you looked at the last video, and I'm going to show you how to start making this mask. So we have our 6x9 piece of material here. I've cut 2 of them, and our first step is going to be to take our 2 pieces of material and reverse them, which means that I am putting the nice side on the inside of the mask and the not so nice side, or the plain side, on the back of the mask. So both sides have the plain side, and inside this sandwich here is all those watermelon. Okay, so now they're all matched up. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Now I have my pin cushions, my pin cushions here. I like to pin things in order to make it stay still. So when I pin something, I just stick the pin through so that you see both ends of the pin on the same side. And I'm not just going to put one, I'm going to put a few. Don't worry about sewing over them. They're meant to be sewn over, and this will help the material from moving around too much as you're sewing all the way around it. And we'll put some more pins over here. You can put in as many pins as you want. If you don't have any pins, you can also use the needles that are in your material as well. Or some people even do what's called a basting stitch, where they do a very loose running stitch, and they will take it out later, but they're just keeping the material together so they can sew it more carefully later. So, and then all my other stuff is in my pin cushion for later for use. So you're also going to need your pieces of elastic or shoelaces. So I'm going to cut probably about 6 inches of this elastic. Since I couldn't find the skinny elastic, I'm going to actually cut this in half. So if you can only find wide elastic and you want to make it skinnier, you can do that. You can just take it and cut it a little bit. It might fray a little bit eventually, but you know, chances are you can make a whole bunch of these masks, so if they do end up needing to be repaired, you'll know what to do. So now I have my 2 pieces of elastic, which I am going to be putting on the ends there eventually. It's going to be a little bit of a tuck-in because we want the elastic to be on the outside later on. So, but we're not going to worry about that for now because we're going to start sewing the bottom first. So you will need your thread. You will probably need a needle threader if you're like me and you can't see the needle very well. And of course you're going to need a sewing needle. So you watched the other video before of how to thread your needle and how to tie a knot. So you know that you need a double arm's length of thread that once you've threaded it into the needle, it's doubled up. I like it doubled up. It makes it a little stronger. So I'm going to put this stuff aside, and I'm actually going to start sewing it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lock my thread into place. So to do that, I'm going to start on the back or the front, doesn't matter, but you're going to make 1 stitch. Remember, when you make your stitches, make them very, very small, and you want them to be very, very close together. So my very first stitch is going to kind of lock it into place. And so on the front, if you're looking here, let me see. Here we go. If you're looking, I made this little stitch right here, okay? And on the back is where the little tail is right here. My knot is in there. I can feel it even if you can't see it. And I'm going to take my other part, the needle part, and I'm going to see, you see where those 2 threads that we tied together, where they separate? You're just going to kind of get that needle through that little hole there and pull it. Nice thing about sewing is that if you make a mistake, you can always undo everything, and it's as if it never happened. So now it's nice and tight. It's not going to fall apart. It's not going to come loose as I'm sewing. So next, I'm going to just sew a simple running stitch. Okay. In and out. You've probably been practicing these already on your other practice projects that we did already. So the running stitch should be pretty simple. But again, you want the stitches to be close together as even as possible and small. You don't want them to be very big stitches. Small stitches are very strong. I'm going to sew right up to this first pin so that you can see I can sew right over the pin and nothing's going to hurt anything. So I'll take the pin out later. So don't worry if your stitching is not completely straight. Be careful of poking yourself too. If you're still poking yourself, make sure your band-aids are nearby. Okay, so I am up to my first pin and I'm just sewing as if it's not even there. If my sewing takes it over or under that pin, that's okay. So see, my needle just came out right next to the pin. It's going to sew right over top. Okay, and there we go. Okay, and then I can take this pin out later as I don't need it anymore. Okay, that stitch was a little off, but that's all right, because that's going to all be on the inside of our mask. We're not even going to notice it later on. Okay, so sew it all the way across. This is going to be probably the most time-consuming part because you need to sew all the way across here to this end. Okay, when you are ready to sew the elastics in, remember I said they had to be tucked in. So they are going to be in here, tucked into your material, so that it will come out like a loop for your ears later on. And you want to kind of keep those ends as wide as possible right now because we're going to put pleats in it later on in order to make it fit on your face a little bit better. So you'll see where I put them here. And again, if you'd like, you can pin them into place so that you know where to find them. Okay, so if I'm going to put it right here, I'm going to concentrate and pin that into place so that my elastic will be in the right spot for my ears later on. Here's the other one. Not right at the edge, but about an inch away from the edge. I'm going to pin it into place. Don't worry if it sticks out the side. That won't hurt anything. And there we go. There are my two elastics pinned in place, and just so you can see what it looks like on the inside, okay, you can see my piece of elastic on the inside there. Okay, and so now since this is the magic of video, ta-da, I have another watermelon one that I have already sewn two sides of, and I wanted to open it up and reverse it just so you can see what's going to happen. So when I open it up and reverse it, you will see that my edges are really nice because of the running stitch I have on the inside, and any little mistakes stays on the inside there. Okay, and you will see here's my piece of elastic, and it's pretty secure in there right now. So, and this is what it's going to look like before I put the pleats in. I'm not finished with this yet. I still need to sew the other pieces in here, so I'm going to put it back in reverse. There we go. Okay, and I already have a little needle here that I can continue sewing with. Okay, and I'm going to sew all the way across this side and all the way across this side, but remember I have to have my elastic in there, so you have an elastic on both sides for both of your ears. If you forget that elastic, you're going to have to undo all this stuff in order to make sure that your elastic can fit in there. Now when you do sew the elastic, as you can see, I put a couple stitches there, not just one. I went through that elastic maybe 4, 5, 6 times. I really want to make sure that when I'm stretching out that elastic later on, that it's not going to break and rip off of my mask later on, and this will help when you wash it as well. So as you can see, I'm going to continue my running stitch, nice and small. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, now some of you are going to ask, well, what do I do when I run out of thread? Because you are going to run out of thread. And you can see here my thread on this part is much shorter already. It's only about 8 inches long. But when I get to be about 6 inches, I'd say 5, 6 inches, that's when you want to kind of stop and lock your thread into place. Okay, so I am close to 5 or 6 inches here. So let's make believe that I'm at 5 or 6 inches here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a nearby stitch and I'm going to go under that stitch a couple of times. Once, twice, and when the little hoop is here, you see the little hoop that I have here that makes like a little lasso here. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to go through that too, and that kind of makes a little knot. I'm going to go through it at least 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. You can do 4th if you want. Okay, here we go. One more time. And now you will simply cut off the extra string. Don't worry about the little tail that's there. You will get your new needle with your new thread that has a new knot in it. So here's another piece of thread with another string here. Here is another knot I'm going to tie real quick. And remember, your first step is going to be to lock your thread into place. So we're going to start front or back. In this case, it doesn't matter because we're simply going to reverse this anyway eventually. So go back in. Here's where my knot is. If I pulled it too much, I'm going to pull it backwards a little bit. I'm going to put my needle in between the 2 pieces of thread here below my knot to lock it into place. Now it's nice and locked, so it's not going to come out while I'm sewing this across. Make sure you're not sewing your piece of elastic while you're sewing across too. Kind of have to feel around to make sure you know where it is at all time. So take your time and sew all the way around, but you need to leave a little hole, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes how to finish that. As soon as I finish sewing this all, I'm going to leave a little piece of hole around here, about right over here, so that I can reverse my mask and you have the nice side to show, and then I'll show you how to do the pleats. So let's work on that next.